Alright, I'm set up, ready to use my lampblack ink, which is in this container here, my bottle of ink, and my little votive pot that I use. See, no matter how that falls over, it's not going to knock it over the desk, which is what I want. I have my bottle of water. I normally use a little votive pot like this, but it's over in my other desk and I didn't pick it up, so I'm just using my bottle of water that I use for watercolours. I've got my dip pen, a cloth, because you may need a cloth if you drip. You will need a knife of some sort. Now, it doesn't have to be a heavy duty knife like this, it can be just a kitchen knife, a small blade, to remove this, because this is wax. This is cork and wax, and I will talk about this in a minute. We're going to show you how to get that off. And you will also want an ice block. Now, my ice block is starting to melt because it's been out a while, but yeah, as long as it's still cold, it'll be fine. If you live in a very, very hot area, and when you press your thumb into this wax, you get an impression of your thumb, put this in the fridge for maybe an hour or so just to harden the wax, and then you can do this, or pop it in the freezer for about half an hour, but for goodness sake, don't forget it's in there, because cracking glass, freezer, exploding mess, you don't want to do it. I'm going to put my bottle so that the wax is touching the cold surface, and I will just turn it round periodically here as I'm showing you other things, just to harden the wax. A lot of people will tell you that you can remove wax from bottles with hot water, and yes, you can, but if you do that and it's corked with a proper cork, you're going to get water in your cork and that will destroy your cork. So, you know, if this is good enough for wine bottles with wax on, then it's good enough for us. Before I open my lampblack ink, I'm going to show you very simply how I use a dip pen. I always do ink testing in the back of my book, as you can see. And I'm going to use one of these for now. These are the Goulet pen samples, which this one was very kindly sent to me by Lee Alexander. Thank you, Lee. And this is Imperial Blue from Diamine. It's the most beautiful royal blue. They come in these little specimen jars, and you can take the lid off and pop that into your votive, and like I said, no matter how you knock that around inside the glass, it's not going to spill. So if you're clumsy like me, that's what you want. Your dip pen, just make sure it is free of dust and any particles and hairs, because trust me, the ends of these get lots and lots and lots of hairs on them. What you want to do is take your pen, and where the nib hole is, that is as far as you want to dip your pen. I'm going to do this close to the camera so you can see what I do. So this pen is not going to go below the widest part of the nib. You see this widest part, the coffin corner? Don't go below that. There is no need to go below that, because there is your ink blob. Now, you'll see a lot of people will dip their ink and immediately they'll scrape it off, and what happens is you get rid of half your ink that way. So don't do that. Dip it in. Make sure you've got a full blob, and then just give it a very gentle shake, very gentle, to make sure that there's no globules of ink. And then all you do is you write with it. So this is Willow fountain pen from pagan parcel at craftingmagic.co.uk. And as you can see, you do get a lot of ink on your pen. As soon as you start getting a double line on your ink, you need to consider dipping your ink again, but you don't need to blot initially, you don't need to do anything. Your pen will automatically produce, I'm assuming it's a good nib, will automatically produce a beautiful smooth line until the reservoir runs out of ink, which, there we go, there's a double line. So at that point you can see the reservoir's empty. There's a little bit of ink here, but it's not going anywhere because it's not compelled to move down the shaft by anything. So at that point you redip your pen. The reason I do that is because if you come up above the coffin corner, you will end up, especially if you hold your pen down here, with ink stains. That is how you end up with ink stains all over your fingers. You should hold an ink pen or a dip pen like this back on the shaft like you would with a paintbrush. So you write at a 45-degree angle. That can be difficult for lefties, but it's not impossible. It will be more difficult if you're a crook hander. If you hold your pen that way, you're going to find it very difficult to use any kind of nib. But if you are a crook hander, lefty, then you want a right-handed nib because you're coming in at the same angle. Whereas if you are a regular left-hander and you write like this, then you want a left-handed nib, which are easy to obtain these days, or a multi-directional nib, which this is. But this has a little blob on the end, a little curl up, like a little bubble almost of metal on the end of the nib. That is the rounded surface, if you like. With this, it's a multi-directional nib because it's got one of those round bubbles on the end. Anyway, if you, like me, write almost vertical with your fountain or dip pens, or you like to draw little things in your books, like so, then you want a multi-directional pen. These carbon ink pens, which I mentioned in my history version, which I mentioned in part 1, are multi-directional nibs. They are excellent for drawing and they're about £9. So they're really, really inexpensive. With dip pens you can keep the same shaft and you can change your nibs or, you know, whatever. But these are basically, you know, I can write with it, even really tiny writing, because it's a very fine point. When you're done, rinse your pen. Don't get the shaft wet, just the metal nib. Give it a shake and pop it down on a piece of paper towel or something like that, piece of linen, cloth, t-shirt material, whatever, to dry off. And when you're done with your ink, a lot of inks will go off if they are left exposed to the air, so recap your ink as soon as you're done with it. Now let's play with lampblack ink. This, while I was doing that, I have been turning this regularly. And lampblack ink, some of the crafting inks are made with just Arabic, but magical inks tend to be made with essential oils and linseed oil and either gum arabic or rabbit glue, depending on how traditional they are. This from Pagan Parcel is actually, I checked with Terry, and it does have a small quantity of linseed oil in it, which means that I cannot get it on my skin because I am allergic to linseed oil, believe it or not. That's why I don't use oil paints. So not only am I going to not touch the ink if I can possibly help it, I'm also going to put gloves on as a precaution because it burns my skin and it really hurts. If you have a similar issue with oil paints where maybe it triggers asthma, or even regular household gloss paint, if that triggers asthma, then you may be allergic to linseed oil, and it may cause you skin problems as well if you are allergic to the fumes. I say may because it's not a set science. It's, you know, I happen to be allergic to the fumes and I can't get it on my skin because it burns me. So, you know, just a heads up, if you are allergic to it, to linseed oil as a breathable substance or as a vapour, then you are more likely to be allergic to having it on your skin. And, you know, by the time you've got it on your skin, it's too late. So this has been sitting on top of a ice pack like this for a little while, so the wax is nice and hard. What I'm now going to do is hold the bottle firmly on the flat desk, and I'm simply going to run my craft knife around, and I'm not turning the knife, I'm turning the bottle. Can you see that? The bottle is turning, but the wax and the cork have stopped turning. That is loose. So you should now be able to lift this off. Be careful that you don't get any ink, any wax in your ink. You don't really want wax in your ink. Although it's just going to be globules of wax that will build up on the top, so it's not going to be the end of the world. But, you know, you don't really want it in your ink. And then put that to one side. And I recommend, personally, that you just remove the excess wax from the bottle so that it doesn't end up in your ink. Obviously, if you're not wearing gloves, you might want to do this with a cloth because you may end up with the ink on your hands. If you want to reseal your ink when you're done with it, especially if you're using it only for magical spell purposes, I mean, I'm going to use mine for all sorts of things. I'm not going to just let it sit there and only use it once in a blue moon. But if you're going to keep your lampblack for specifically writing in your grimoire or specifically writing spells, then keep your wax on your cork, pop your cork back into your bottle so that it's pushed back into place. You'll know when it's in place because the wax will fall off. That's why we left the wax on the cork. And with whatever candle you are using on your altar, simply turn it upside down, dip it into the liquid wax and take it out again. And when it's dry, you've resealed your ink. As I said, I'm not going to bother resealing my ink properly. If you're not going to reseal it properly, usually ink bottles come with a lip here. Can you see there? There's a lip. As you can see, it will leak if you don't seal it. What I normally do is put a piece of wax paper down over the top of the cork, bind it round with either a piece of string or actually what's it called? Elastic band works just as well, or a piece of wax cord. You can take a piece of embroidery cord and wax it and wrap that around, and that will seal your ink for you. So you see, this is why I made sure that I used gloves, because I really didn't want to get this stuff on my hands while I was opening it. We can now put our lampblack into our votive where we can't knock it over, and we can write with our lampblack ink, and it's the same as we were doing before. So just turn it this way, you'll be able to see a little bit better. You dip your pen into your ink only as far as the coffin corners, which in a small bottle like this will quite often be down to the bottom of the bottle. Okay, so there's your ink in your well. That's a little bit too much, so I'm just going to tap it against the bottle just to remove a little bit of it. And then you can write with your pen. It's quite difficult with gloves on. I'm just being fancy, I'm just playing. Anybody can just write with a pen, I mean, come on. Make it pretty. So if you wanted to, you can embellish your writing. Go over it, make it darker. What you'll find with lampblack is that it's not black unless you go back over it. It's actually sort of a charcoal colour. Which, if you think about it, makes sense because it is made from charcoal or, you know, soot. So it is actually a kind of a grey colour. If you go over it though, you will get this lovely black ink. And if you end up with a big globule of ink there, you can lift that up with your what they call a thirsty pen or a thirsty brush, which is when your pen has run dry, dip it into the globule of ink and you'll be able to pick it up and use that somewhere else on your page. So if you do have a mishap, you can use up that blob of ink. It's also handy to have blotting paper, which I did not get out before. Oops, fibre from the paper. This is not the best paper for using a sharp dip pen on. Yeah, I didn't get my blotting paper out because I didn't think about it. But eventually you will get to the point where you can't pick up any more of that ink there, and you simply blot it with your blotting paper. I'm going to use a paper towel because I don't have my blotting paper to hand. Just take a corner of a piece of paper towel and pop it into the ink and it will suck it up just like that. And if you need to do it again, take another corner and pop it into the globule of ink and it will suck it up. There you go. You'll probably still have to blot it afterwards because that will still be wet. So you would just take your piece of blotting paper, which is a flat piece of paper, and you would simply rock it over like that, and then that's done. Wash your pen. Wash it thoroughly because lampblack, like I said, it may or may not be bulletproof, so you don't want it on your pen. Let your pen dry and pop the lid back on your lampblack. If you're going to use it again within a couple of hours, then you don't really need to seal it. If you're not going to use it again, then you really need to seal it because it will react to air. So, yeah, either a piece of wax paper and a cord or elastic band around the middle, or turn it upside down and dip it into some wax. So there you go. I hope that was useful for you in how to use your lampblack ink and your dip pens from Crafting Magic. And if you do use yours, Let me know down below what you use it for. Are you going to use it for drawing? Are you going to use it for your book of spells? Are you going to use it for spells only? Are you going to paint with it? Are you going to colour with it? Tell me. I want to know what you're going to do with it. I'm going to use mine in my grimoire, but I will also use it for general purpose as well, because that ink there's quite a lot of ink there. It will last for quite a long time. And I can certainly get quite a few drawings out of it, so I may draw in my grimoire with it or something like that. Hope you've enjoyed this week's Witchy Wednesday, and I will see you again soon. Bye!